Hello guys, and welcome to the Unreal Engine 5 beginner tutorial. In this video I will show you guys how to download and install Unreal Engine 5, how to navigate through the UI, how to import meshes, create materials, landscapes, and more. We will create this little island scene using Quixel Megascan's assets and also the default water tools available in Unreal Engine. We will finally dive into some blueprint and explain how to use it in your games. If you are new to Unreal Engine, this video will walk you through everything and you don't need any prior experience. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into the video. Alright, so the first thing that you need to do is go ahead and head over to epicgames.com and download the Epic Games Launcher if you don't have it already. I'll leave a link in the description below. Once you go ahead and install the Epic Games Launcher, you're going to head over to the Unreal Engine tab here on the side. Then we're going to head over to the UE5 tab. So here you'll click on this blue button, Download Early Access for Unreal Engine 5. And I've already done that, so I'll have my version appear right here on the Library tab, 5.0. So a quick overview for the Epic Games Launcher if you're not super familiar. This is where you have your engine versions. So I have Unreal Engine 4.25, 2.4, 2.6, and then Unreal Engine 5. Over here are your projects that you create, and below that are your marketplace content packs. So if you're not aware of the marketplace, there is a marketplace tab where you can buy 3D models, assets, animations for your games. Okay, so we'll go back to the Library tab. Once you're finished downloading Unreal Engine 5, you can click this Launch button. Okay, and here is the project browser / creator. We have our recent projects here, and then we have the games, film, architecture, and automotive product design, manufacturing. So we're going to be focusing on obviously the games part in this tutorial. Over here on the right, we can see all of the different templates that we can create. So we have a blank template, a first-person game, puzzle, third-person, top-down, virtual reality, and advanced vehicle. What we're going to be creating is a simple third-person project. Here we can choose either to have Blueprint or C++. We're just going to stick with Blueprint. We can have our target platform. We're going to stick to desktop, maximum quality. We're going to enable starter content, so make sure you have that checkbox marked. And in our project name, we can name this UE5 tutorial. Click Create. Alright, once we finish loading in here, if this is either your first time in Unreal Engine 5 or if this is your first time using Unreal Engine in general, let me explain the layout here for you. So first of all, we have the main viewport area. This is where you can navigate and move around in your game. So to do that, you can hold down the right mouse button to move your camera around. And then you can use the WASD to move around. So with those controls, you can move freely around your game. Now there are a couple other controls. You can use the left mouse button to pan forward on the X-axis. And then you can use the middle mouse button to pan up and down on the Z-axis. Right off the bat for movement, you can adjust here this camera speed. You can either go really fast, or you can scale this down to go a little bit more slower. Okay, so we'll start out here with the top left and just go over to the right. So first we have our file options. So file, new level, save all is a very important button. New project, open project, or recent projects. We have edit, editor preferences, project settings, and plugins. These are all pretty important things. And then of course, source control. So if you're working either on a team, you want to be able to work on the same project at the same time, or you just want a way you can back up your project and revert changes that might have messed up your game. Then we have window here, and we have all the different windows, which I will explain. We have tools, such as our merge actors tool. Then we have build, so for building lighting and things like that. And then we have help, which takes us to some links to the documentation. Okay, and then here we have our little save button right here. Then we have our create tab. So originally this create tab was on the left side, but basically we can create lights, shapes, cinematics, visual effects, volumes, and then we have the all classes here. Okay, and we have, of course, basic, which is like empty pawn and collision boxes. Over here we have our content. So here's our content browser. And then we have Quixel Bridge right here, which I will talk about in a minute. Then we have our blueprints tab. We can open our level blueprint. And then our cinematics for sequences. Okay, and then over here on the left, we have our viewport options. So we can show our FPS here. We also have our field of view, all of that good stuff. Then we have our viewport camera settings, so we can go into top mode. If we were, like, say, designing our level and we need a top-down view of where to move our assets. Then we have bottom, left, right, front, and back. And then we have back to perspective. Over here we have our different modes. So we have lit, unlit, wireframe, detail lighting, collision, and so on. Then we have the show tab, so we can show various things like the grid, our landscape. We can show and hide various things. Also very helpful. Over here at the top, we have our different modes, which some of you might be familiar with. We have the active selecting mode. So this means I can select objects. Then we have the landscape mode, where we can sculpt and manage our landscape. We have the foliage mode, where we can paint grass, trees, and stuff onto our landscape. We have mesh paint, so we can paint textures onto some of the meshes. We have fracture editing. This is for chaos destruction and destructible meshes. Then we have active brush editing, which is for blocking out simple geometry. Over here from the right, we have the play tab. If you hit play, you can see we can control our character, WASD to move, spacebar to jump, and you press escape to exit out. If you hit this play menu options, you can see we have a couple of different options for hitting play. We can do it in the selected viewport. We can do it in a new editor window. We can also do a standalone game. This would mean the game would run as if you were starting it up as an exe file. Then we have simulate, so we can simulate the current level without actually playing. We can move around. And then we have the number of players. So this is for, say, multiplayer. If I wanted to do 2 players, I can change my net mode here to client, play here as 2 new editor windows. You can see here we have multiplayer. Okay, I'm going to change this net mode back to standalone. So standalone is like single player. Listen server is a server and a client. Play as client is if you were playing as a dedicated server. Okay, over here we have our select objects, translate, rotate, and scale. So these tools, you can see Q, W, E, and R. So right here we can do W to move, E to rotate, R to transform. So you just need to tap W, E, or R to filter through those controls. Okay, this little button right here is local versus world. So I can change this object to local, click E to rotate this object, then go back to global, and you can see that we rotated this object locally and we can still move it according to the global grid. So this definitely comes in handy when you're editing your meshes. Then we have our grid snapping. So if we take this snapping size and do, say, 100, you can see this cube snaps to a grid. So this controls snapping size, so we can have a smoother snapping, or we could have a more accurate snapping. You can also enable or disable snapping by hitting that little grid right there, and you can see we can move it freely. You can re-enable it by hitting that little button and it turns blue. Same thing for rotate. We can change the degrees in which it rotates. So it rotates 30 degrees. And of course we can always disable it so we get a smooth rotation. Same thing for scaling. We can adjust how precisely it scales. And of course we can turn it off so we get a smooth scaling. Okay, and again we have the camera speed, so we know just how fast we move around our level. And then we have the quad view of our level, so we get the left, right, front, and top, as well as our perspective. Then we can click that again to minimize that. Over on the right here we have our world outliner. So this contains all of the different meshes here in our level, and also contains our lights, players. Everything that you see in the level here is in our world outliner. Down below we have the details panel. So if we select a certain object, you're going to see the transform, location, rotation, scale, the mesh, the material, physics, collision, and more. So you might not have this world settings tab. I usually hit my window and click world settings. But in your world settings tab, a few things to note. Here is the game mode. The game mode is the blueprint class and where you store all the rules of your game. It has an assigned character class and a couple other classes that I'll talk about here in a bit. Okay, and lastly, our content browser. So if you hit this content drawer, you'll see your content browser. Or if you hit Control Space, it'll pull up the content browser. So the content browser is where you have all your different assets in your game. So for example, this cube, right click it and click Browse to Asset. You're going to see in our content folder, geometry, meshes, we have this cube. So our content browser holds all the different meshes, audio files, all of our maps, and everything for our game. To either hide your content browser, you can hit Control Space to hide it, or you can just click into the level and it will hide automatically. Sometimes you might want your content browser to stay open. To do that, you click this Dock and Layout button, and that will have it permanently open. Alright, so first of all, let's talk about static meshes. So like I said, this scene is made out of static meshes, and what a static mesh is if we right click, click Browse to Asset, it'll show it here in our content browser. We can double click that, and it'll pull up the static mesh viewer here. So we can dock this tab here at the top. And you're going to see here is part of the level. So a static mesh is a mesh that is completely static. It doesn't do anything. It just stays the exact same throughout the entire duration of your game. It's a completely static item. It doesn't do anything but sit there. So for example, rocks, maybe like a park bench, buildings, these all can be static meshes. Static meshes commonly have materials applied to them, and a material is what allows it to have a certain texture. So if we click on this ramp material, we can see here the material editor. So again, we can take this tab and dock it here at the top. So for our material, we have the preview right here. As you can see, this is just a basic, plain, solid color material. It's not really anything to it, but you can see all that is this constant vector 3, which controls the color of this material. So if we double click that, we can change it to whatever we want. We could change it to a red color. Hit OK. Save that. If we go back to our third person example map, you can see here we change the material color for all of these meshes. Okay, so we can go ahead and undo that by Control Z to undo. Click Save and close this. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to set up our own material and import a mesh. So to do that, we'll first create a new folder. We're going to call this tutorial project. In here, we'll add a new folder called meshes. And we'll add another new folder called materials. So in our meshes folder, we can go ahead and import the static mesh. So if you guys haven't already, download the UE5 project files linked in the description. We're going to drag in the palmtree.fbx file into the meshes folder. So right off the bat, you'll see this FBX import options. So if you've never imported a FBX model, essentially this is a 3D model. We have our options here for skeletal mesh. We're not going to do a skeletal mesh because this is a static mesh. We have various information here, such as we could modify the scale, the rotation. We're going to leave this as is and click import. Okay, so in our content browser here, we now have a palm static mesh. If we double click that, you can see this nice little palm tree. We can go ahead and close that, and then we have this M palm tree instance. We can go ahead and just delete that. Then back into our tutorial project materials, we're going to import these textures right into the materials folder. Then we can go ahead and do right click, and as you can see here, there's a lot of different options. We have the new folder, which we've made for these couple new folders. We have our blueprint class. I'll talk about this in a bit. Our level, material, and then down here we have a lot more options: animations, blueprints, foliage, gameplay, miscellaneous, sounds, all that stuff. So we're going to create a material here. You can just click on that. I'm going to name this palm tree _M. Double click it and dock this at the top. So to create a material, it's very simple. We drag in texture nodes and we connect them up to our material node. So go back to your content browser, click on a texture and shift click to select all three of them. Left click and drag them into your material editor and drop them like that. So we can arrange these like so. So normally your material will have usually 3 different maps. You'll have a base color, roughness, specular, metallic, and then a normal map. This particular mesh, this palm tree, is transparent on the leaves part, so it has an extra map called a mask. So the first thing that we need to do to change this material to allow this mask, now this again is very specific to this material, is we need to select the material node and change the blend mode to masked. Now we can hook up our textures to our material. So left click on this RGB to the base color. For this mask, we're going to hook this up into the opacity mask. And for our normal map, we'll hook that up into our normal. And as you can see here on the left, we have our material. We can left click and move our camera around, and we can see the material in action. So the base color here is just a 2D texture color of our mesh. Then our opacity mask is telling the material where to mask out information. That way we can have these nice little leaves for our palm tree. Then the normal map is telling the engine where the light should reflect so that we can get these nice little lines here that makes it look like the mesh has all these little details. So this little material preview, we can also switch it to a cylinder. We can also do it as a plane. We can do it as a cube. And then the final option here is preview it on a mesh. So if we wanted to go back to our meshes here and select our palm tree, we can click on that and preview the material on a mesh. Okay, so we can go ahead and close out of this, open up our palm tree, and over here in the material slots, we can assign that palm tree _M material. Okay, so you can see we have this nice palm tree mesh that we made. We can go ahead and close this and then drag our palm tree into the level. So there's our palm tree right there. We can move it around, click R to scale this down. Another neat thing is that you can click Alt and drag off of one of these to duplicate. Also, another useful tip is if you ever get far away from your mesh here, you can select it here in the World Outliner and click F to focus instantly on that mesh. So if you ever get lost, say down here, you just select on your mesh, click F to focus there, and of course you can adjust your camera speed accordingly. Alright, so we just created our first mesh here with a material. Let's talk about Quixel Bridge, which is a helpful tool for getting other meshes and materials into our game. So to access Quixel Bridge, we're going to go to Content, Quixel Bridge, and this will pop open the bridge window. So I can go ahead and make this full screen by double clicking. If this is your first time opening up Quixel Bridge, it's going to ask you to log in. You want to log in with your Epic Games account, and it will allow you to access all of the free assets here. There's over 15,000 free assets that you can use for your commercial game. So once you're logged in, you can see we have 3D assets, which are meshes, static meshes. So we have a variety of different things such as furniture, rocks, parts of a building, fruit, all sorts of things. And these are all high quality, photorealistic, photo scanned meshes. So for example, this rock here is actually photo scanned. We can get it at low, medium, and high quality. So I'll go ahead and put this in a high quality. Okay, and once you're signed in, you can hit this little download button, and it will queue up the download here. Once it's downloaded, you can see it added to your local. So if you hit your local, these are all the assets that you've downloaded and are stored locally on your computer. So we can click this add button here, and that will go ahead and import it into our project right into the content browser. And so you can actually either navigate it to the content browser right here, or you can drag it actually directly from your bridge into your project. So we'll come over here, we can take our rock and drag it right into the game like that. So we can take a look at this mesh here. You can see it's very high quality. And essentially these are all photo scanned assets. So the team at Quixel goes out with like an 8K camera and they take high quality pictures of these rocks and photo scan them into game assets. So the Quixel Bridge is a very helpful tool, not only for assets but also materials. So if you go over to the Surfaces tab, you can see there's a wide variety of materials. We have ice, rock, wood, metal, whatever material you need, you can import it directly into Unreal, and just by clicking on it and downloading it. There's also decals, which are basically textures that you can put on static meshes on top of the previous material. And then we have imperfections, which is like a mask or a filter that we can put over other materials. So that's Quixel Bridge summarized. Like I said, there's a lot of different assets in here, and I would suggest playing around with this, downloading assets, moving them around your scene to see what you can make. Alright, so let's talk about landscapes real quick. So first of all, let's go ahead and create ourselves a new map. So we'll do File, New Level, and we're going to go with this time of day level. So you can see here we're in this nice level here with these clouds and the lighting and the controls here. To move the sunlight around, you can hit Control L and use the left mouse button to control the time of day. File, save current level as, and in our content tutorial project we'll just name this new map. Okay, so to create a landscape, we're going to go over to our landscape tab. You're going to see here we have this little green grid on our map. This is essentially telling us the preview of what our landscape is going to look like. Okay, so over here on the left, you can see we have our landscape tab. So we have a new landscape, create new. We can assign our landscape a material. We have the location, rotation, scale. And then down here we can choose how big our landscape is going to be. So the overall resolution, you can up this to 2017 by 2017 for a really big landscape. Or we can change this back by hitting that little back button to go back to 8 by 8. So our overall resolution determines how big our map is going to be, and it also comes at the cost of components. Essentially, components are these green boxes here, and each of them is a draw call. By having a larger landscape, you have more of these, and it makes your computer have more draw calls and have to process more information by having a large landscape. So we also have the import from file. So this is if you were going to import a height map. Height maps are pre-made texture files that look something like this, where you have the white defining the peaks of a mountain and the black defining no information. So this can be useful to create realistic terrain inside of your game. Alright, so we'll go ahead and do a create new, and we'll just click the create button. So here we have our landscape. You can see here we have a few different options. We have our manage, sculpt, and paint. So first we'll start off with the manage. So here you can select each component. So say if you wanted to delete a couple components that weren't needed on the screen, you could select them and click delete. Then we have the sculpt, which allows us to sculpt detail on our landscape by hitting left click. So we can left click and sculpt these little hills like so. The sculpting tools are all right here. We have sculpt, and underneath the sculpt we have our brush type, fall off. So we can change our fall off. Control Z to undo. Then we have our tool strength. We have our brush size and our brush fall off, which controls that little spear in the middle. Then we have the smooth, which smooths things out. We have flatten, so this will create a flat terrain. We have the ramp tool, which allows us to create a ramp between two parts, like so. Go ahead and reset that to remove that. You can see here we have a nice little ramp. We have the erosion tool, so this allows us to create a little erosion on our hill. We have hydro erosion, which is simulating if it was raining on this hill, creating some erosion. We have noise, which gives us all these little bumps. Then we have retopologize, which I'm not going to use. It kind of messes with the topology of your mesh. And then we have mirror, so we could mirror part of our terrain. We have copy, which is a little copy tool, so we could click R to translate, W to move this around, and we can put this around our little hill here. Copy data, move it over here, and then we could do sculpt, and then we can left click and fill this all in with our brush. Go back to our sculpt, and you can see here we've copied and pasted that hill over. So very basic tools that allow you to create landscapes. Then over here we have the paint tab. So we'll go ahead and create a landscape material, but essentially the paint tab allows you to paint your landscape So for example, if you had sand, you could paint sand onto the beach, dirt and stuff to make a path, and so on. Alright, so let's go ahead and create a landscape material. To do this, we will need some materials and textures. So we'll go ahead and go back to Quixel Bridge, and we're going to get a couple of materials. So first off, we're going to go ahead and search for grass. And you can also search for these clover patches here. Just type in clover patches on grass, and then you can click download. Alright, once you've clicked download, we can go ahead and add that. Now we're going to need some sand. So we'll go ahead and search up sand. So we can use this Thai rippled sand. So click on that, click download, and then we can add that as well. And last but not least, we need some rock material. So we go search rock. We can filter this by surfaces, and then we can scroll down here and we can get something like this layered cliff rock. So we'll go ahead and download and add that to our project as well. Alright, once you've downloaded and added those to your project, we can go ahead and pop open our content drawer. I'm just going to go ahead and dock this into our layout for now. And you can see here we have our clover patches on grass, layered rock cliff, and our Thai rippled sand. So we'll go back to our content browser, and in our tutorial project, we'll go to our materials folder and create a new material. Call this landscape_m. Double click to open that, dock that at the top. So here we're going to create our first landscape material. So a landscape material can consist of multiple different textures, and they are called landscape layers. So to blend them, we add a right click here and search for landscape layer blend. Click on that, and on the left details here we can add layers. So click add and add. So add 4 layers here. The first one, you hit that down arrow, we can go ahead and name this sand. Our second one, we can name this rock. Our third one, we can name this grass. And the fourth one, we can name this auto. Go ahead and save that. And next up, we need to add our materials in here. So usually you would drag in your textures into your material here, but for us, we're going to go a little bit of a different route and add what is called a material function. So to do that, we right click, add a material, in textures, go down here to material function, and we're going to name this grass_mf. So go ahead and double click that. And in here, we're going to go back to our content browser, click the mega scans, surfaces, clover patches on grass, and click on these and shift click and drag them into our grass material function. So in here, really quick, we're going to drag off of our output result and make material attributes. So this is going to look a little bit more familiar like the normal material inputs, but essentially what we're doing is we're making a material inside a material. And this will help us keep our nodes very clean and also prevent us from having to redo some extra work. So now in here, we'll go ahead and sort these like so. So we have our base color, our roughness and ambient occlusion, and then our normal map here. So off the back, we're going to drag off of the UVs and do a multiply. Then we're going to drag off the A and do a landscape coordinates. This is going to tell us how much we want to texture our material. So off of here, we'll do a scalar parameter and name this grass close and hook these all up for the UVs of all three of these. Then we're going to copy these three over and drag them down. And we're going to drag the A to the landscape coordinates, drag the B off and do another scalar parameter. And we're going to name this grass bar. So the scalar parameter allows us to define a variable, and in this case it's allowing us to tell how much we want to texture this material. That way we can reduce the repetition in our landscape material. Next thing we're going to do is drag off the RGB and do linear interpolate. And this is what is known as a lerp, which takes an A and a B and combines them together using the alpha to drive that combination. And it outputs one value. What we're going to do is copy and paste this 3 times. And we're going to hook up the RGB into A right there, and the RGB for the base color into B like so. Then for our roughness, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to get the R into A. And for the next one, we're going to grab the G into A. Same for the bottom one, the R goes into B, and the G goes into B, like so. Okay, last one for our normal map, we're going to just grab the RGB into A, and the RGB into B. For these, we can hook the base color to the base color. For this one, this red channel is the roughness. The green channel here can go into ambient occlusion, and the normals here can go into the normal. Next up, we need to create our alpha blend. So this will help tell the material at what distance should it blend. Go ahead and right click at a distance underscore blend. And then here we can drag off here and do scalar parameter. We can name this blend range. And we can name this other one start offset. So we can add a default value of say 8,000, the start offset of -2,000, and we can hook up the result into each of these alphas right here. So this allows us to blend these two materials at this distance. So when we get farther away, we can scale out the material, and it helps with the repetition and the overall look. So we'll go ahead and save this. And now that we've made that function, we can go back to our content, tutorial project, materials, and we can just duplicate this function 2 more times. Right click, duplicate, name this rock material function, duplicate that, name this sand material function, double click our rock, and all we need to do here is switch out our textures. So left click and control left click these 2 texture nodes, and we'll go to our layered rock cliff. You can select the texture here, which is the base color. And over in our rock material function, we can go to the details and hit this little arrow to use that. So that's a very useful tool. If you select anything in your content browser, you can hit that little arrow and it will automatically assign it right there. Same thing for our roughness. Control click these, select our roughness here, and click the little arrow. Same for our normal maps, click those, and select your normal map and click the assign arrow. Save that, and we'll repeat that. Go back to your tutorial project materials, open up your sand, and do the same thing here by selecting your base color. Go back to your sand, go to your tie rippled sand, select your sand material and hit the assign. Same for your roughness channel. Click on the roughness and assign that. And then lastly, your normal map. Okay, now that we have those done, we can go back to our landscape material. And here we can go ahead and go to our tutorial project materials and select our sand, rock, and grass material functions and drag those into here. So you can see we have our material functions right here, and they're all nice and neat in our landscape material. So we can go ahead and connect up our sand to sand, our rock to rock, and our grass to grass. Then for our layer auto, we'll go ahead and add a world aligned blend. And then off of the blend sharpness, we're going to add a scalar parameter and name this slope sharpness. And same thing for blend bias, add a scalar parameter and name this blend bias. So these scalar parameters will allow us to tweak these values when we're in our map looking at our terrain. And this world aligned blend will allow us to create a landscape auto material. That way we can have the engine do all the work for us and auto texture our landscape based on slope. Off of our with explicit normal, we'll go ahead and do a blend material attributes. For the A, we'll do rock. For the B, we'll do grass. And then we'll plug this into our layer auto. And before we do this, one more thing we need to do is break material attributes so that we have all the connections we need. And one last step, we need to go ahead and add some variation. We have our starter content here. We have our materials. There's a bunch of different materials in here. We're going to use this gold material. Up here, there's this micro and macro variation. This is essentially a black and white texture that adds these little dark spots and kind of breaks up the material here. And this is really helpful for our landscape material. So we can select this, Control C, and Control V to paste it in here. We're going to drag off the lerp and do a multiply node and multiply the base color by that variation and hook that up for our base color. Then we'll hook up the roughness to the roughness, normal to the normal, and the ambient occlusion to our ambient occlusion like so. Okay, then we hit save and we've just made our first landscape material. So go to our content browser, tutorial project materials, and before we apply this material to our landscape, let's go ahead and right click our landscape material and create what is called a material instance. So a material instance, if we double click here, you can see there's no editor in here. We can't edit the actual material. This allows us to non-destructively edit the values, the scalar parameters that we added, so that we can adjust the values that we want without destroying our master material. So in here, we're going to check all of these boxes, and we're just going to apply some values here, -12 for our blend bias, 30 for our slope sharpness, grass close will be 0.1, grass far will be 0.009. Go ahead and hit save. Then with our landscape selected, we can go to our details, scroll down here till we get to this landscape tab, and we can see we have a landscape material. So we can go ahead and drag that onto there. So you're going to see here, looks very strange, but our shaders right now are compiling. So now what we need to do is go into our landscape tab, and we're going to have to create layer infos. So head over to the paint tab. Under the sand, we're going to create a weight blended normal, and we can just go ahead and click save. And you can see here we have sand on our map. Going to do this for our rock, create layer info, weight blended layer info, and then we'll do this for our grass and for our auto. Okay, and now we can start painting materials onto our landscape. So we can do rock and left click. You're going to see it's compiled the shaders. You can see we can start painting on our landscape here, this rock material. You can also paint some grass. And then of course we have the auto material, and what the auto material does is it automatically textures our terrain. So if I go ahead and paint this onto our landscape, you're going to see it automatically textures the areas with rock where there is a slope in the mountain. And instead of painting this entire landscape, what I'm going to do is just delete this, go back to our landscape, we'll create a new one, go ahead and drag our material instance onto the material, go back to our landscape tab, and under the paint we're just going to click under the auto or auto layer info, and it will automatically apply our auto material to the entire landscape. So now I'm going to go ahead and close this content browser, go back to our landscape mode. We can click the sculpt tab and we can start sculpting our landscape. So you see, as we sculpt, the landscape automatically has rock assigned on the slope sides. We can use the flatten tool. You see our rock material there on the sides. So we can go ahead and actually adjust the scaling here of the texture. So if we go and put our landscape material instance right here, drag this out, we can adjust these values here. So we have the blend bias, so this allows us to control the blend of the slope. So we'll put this back to or -14. Our grass close controls the texture of how close it is. Looks like we actually need to adjust our rock close, and to do that we go back to our content browser, tutorial project, materials. In our rock material function we actually did not add custom scalar parameters, so we'll go ahead, click the grass close, name this to rock close, grass far, change that to rock far, and then same thing for the sand. We'll go ahead and click on this and change this to sand close and sand far. Save that, and now if we open up our landscape material instance, we have more parameters here we can play with. So we'll go ahead and checkbox all of these. For our rock close we'll do 0.1, and we'll scale this up. So we can go ahead and smooth things out here and go back to our material instance. So the texturing up close should be fairly detailed. So we can go ahead and take the rock up close and do maybe .1 seems good. And then as we get farther away, we want this to be like 0.01, 0.05. Something like that. You can play around with the values. Sand close, we can do the same thing, even though we don't have it in the scene at the moment. 0.1, 0.0, 5. And go ahead and hit save. Okay, so another thing we want to do is to create a post process. So go to create all classes, search here post process volume, drag that into the scene. We're going to search in the details here. Exposure for the min and max brightness here, we want to take this down to 1 and 0.3. That way our camera doesn't have too much exposure when we look at the landscape. And then we want to do infinite bounds, and we can go ahead and play with the exposure. That way it doesn't get too dark in here. Alright, next up we can create a basic water body. So first we need to enable the water tools. To do that, we go to Edit, Plugins, search for water. You're going to enable the water plugin, and then you're going to search for landmass and enable that plugin as well. Click yes and restart now. Make sure you hit save selected. Alright, now if this is your first time enabling the water tools within Unreal Engine 5, you're going to have a little compiling shaders in the bottom right. Now this is going to take probably 15 to 20 minutes, maybe longer, depending on your computer specs. But once it's finished, you can go ahead and go to your new map. Alright, so the first things first, you need to click on your landscape and checkbox this enable edit layers. Then we can go ahead and go to create all classes, search for water, and here we have the couple different options. We have island, lake, ocean, river. We're going to go ahead and go with the ocean and drag that into our scene. So you can see here it automatically affected our landscape, and that is using the landmass plugin. So you can see we have these different spline points that we can move around, and it will automatically adjust our landscape like so. Okay, so there's a couple things we can do. We can actually take some of these spline points and bring them out. You can alt drag on them to duplicate out, and we can create a little island shape. And you can also drag, alt drag in like so, and create whatever kind of weird shaped island you want. And you can also take these little curves and adjust the actual curves themselves. Okay, so we can go back into our landscape mode here and into our paint tab, and we can go ahead and select our sand layer, click our sand layer info, and we can start painting our sand onto our landscape. So this is going to be really nice for our beach. So what we can go ahead and do is scale this brush size up and paint all along the coast of our landscape here. Okay, and just keep painting like so. And then we're going to increase the brush size here and get everything underneath, because if we actually hide the water, you're going to see that underneath it is either grass or rocks, so we're just going to paint it all to sand. Okay, and then we're going to decrease the brush size and decrease the fall off, and we'll paint a little bit more of the beach. And we can kind of break it up by just making the lines not all the way straight, but just breaking it up here and there, just like so. Alright, and we can also go back to our sculpt tools here and scale up our brush a little bit, and add a little bit more hills here. And as we sculpt, you can see our landscape auto material here in action. And then we can use some of the erosion tool here and adjust our brush size, make it a little bit larger, and scale down the brush fall off. Okay, a little bit like that. And then I actually want to take our flatten tool, scale down our brush size, and flatten the peaks. That way we have more of a hill. And then maybe some parts of these I can take the sculpt it up a little bit, and then use the flatten tool to flatten so we have more of a cliff. Alright, so we can go ahead and we can search for our player start. So we hit F, we can focus in, we can drag this above that mesh, and when we hit play, we have our character here. Then we have our beach over here, our sand texture, and our water. Okay, so we can go ahead and now use the Foliage Tool to paint some palm trees onto our map. So go to the active foliage editing mode, and we're going to open up our content browser and go to our tutorial project, meshes, and click our palm tree and drag it into our foliage browser here. So with our palm tree selected, we can adjust the painting density. I'm going to do something like 0.001. We can scale up our brush size, and this will allow us to, and maybe increase our density up a little bit, 0.05. And we can paint some palm trees like so. Okay, so obviously these are all the same size, all the same scale. So what we can do to break things up is, if we Control Z to undo that, we can go ahead and under our scaling here, we can tweak some of the values. So we can give a min and max value of say 0.8 and max 1.6. Okay, and so now we can start painting again. It's going to randomize the scale of our palm trees. So we can add some more meshes and trees and stuff into here. We have this Mega Scans, 3D Assets, Nordic Beach Rock Formation. So you can just go and drag these meshes into your scene to add rocks to your scene, or you could use the Foliage Tool again to paint these. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is get some assets from the Quixel Bridge and download them to our project. So we can search for beach rock. So we got a lot more options here. I'm just going to download these Thai beach rocks, and instead of having the high quality, I'm going to use Nanite, which is part of Unreal Engine 5's new technology that allows you to have high quality photo scan assets in your game while still maintaining really good frame rate. Alright, so I'm going to add some grass here. I've just searched tropical, and under here we can just add this velvet grass, so we can go ahead and download that. And then we can also select ferns here, and we can select this silver lady fern, download that, and add that to the project as well. Alright, once you've added all of that content, we can go to our content drawer. You can see here it's compiling shaders. Okay, so we can pull up our foliage tab here, in our content browser, we can just go ahead and dock that. And you can see we have all of our different options here. You can also go ahead and add these ferns here, drag those in, and select all these other grass types. Okay, and with all those checked, we can go ahead and add some variations here. So we can do our min of 0.8 and say our maximum of 1.2. And then, of course, we need to crank our density down to 0.01. And you're going to see it's going to start compiling shaders for some of these. Maybe we'll crank up our density to 0.1. Maybe we'll just crank this up to, say, 5. And we might need to adjust the radius as well as the min and max scaling so we get better variation here. All right, next up we can add also rocks. So if we go over to Megascans, 3D assets, any of these rocks right here, Nordic beach rocks, what we're going to do is deselect everything like that and drag in our beach rocks. And with Control, click all these selected. We can go ahead and change our settings here. First, we want to adjust our Z placement. So our maximum will be -1. And then our uniform, our min and max, we're going to change this 0.8 and 1.8. Density, we're going to bump this down to, say, 0.5, and maybe we'll bump down this to -4. Okay, so you can see here the negative Z offset pretty much puts the mesh, tries to put it below the terrain. We need to bump up the scale here to at least do 1 and 3.5 and bump down this to -7 maybe. Okay, so like that. And of course we can always come in here and manually select some of these meshes and move them around. Can erase some of these that we don't need. And then we can select some of these and move them down. Can also rotate them a little bit. So, okay, so our beach is looking pretty good. Of course, we can always add more different sort of meshes and stuff and break up the grass a little bit. It's a little bit repetitive, so we can always go back and erase certain areas in our brush here, like so. Go to our erase tool, scale it up. And just weed some of these things out. That way there's not a whole ton of these. And yeah, it's looking pretty decent. Okay, so another thing that we can do is we can always come in here and adjust our lighting. So if we do Control L, we can adjust the lighting in our scene here. And also add a create exponential height fog. And in our details here, we can adjust fog density, fog fall off height, the start distance, and the cutoff distance. And our max opacity here. Okay, and just like that, let's save that. And maybe we can adjust the lighting just a little bit. And yeah, that's our little scene that we made here. Now I want to go ahead and dive into Blueprint very quick, which is essentially the visual scripting system of Unreal Engine. It allows us to create various gameplay elements to our game, and we can create some very powerful things. So let's go ahead and create some Blueprint. So let me go ahead and explain what is Blueprint if you've never played with it before. So if you go into your content browser, in our third person BP, we have blueprints and our third person character. Double click that and open it up. So this is our character blueprint. It might look a little bit overwhelming. If we head over to this viewport tab, you can see the character. We have our character here, and we have our camera and a little collision capsule. So a blueprint is made up of various different components, as well as the event graph. So if you hit the event graph here, we have the character's movement and input. So this is what allows the character to move around in the game. We have our move forward, which is our WASD, and then we have our jump, which is our spacebar. So over here on the left, we have pretty much like our scene outliner, kind of like our world outliner. If we head over to our viewport, you can see our character is made of a capsule component, an arrow, our character's mesh, our camera boom, and our camera. In Blueprint, you have various different actors. So if we go back into my content browser, I right click, I can add a blueprint class. Going to see there are a couple different classes that we can pick from. So we have an actor, a pawn, a character, and then player controller, game mode, and so on. So an actor can be quite literally anything. So it could be like a rock or a tree that you want to chop down, or it could be like a chest or something that you open up. The pawn can be anything that can be possessed by either a player or AI. So this could be like a car pawn, a horse that you can ride. It could be an NPC as well. So a character has more things like the ability to walk around and to control your character. So our third person character is a character blueprint class. And in our event graph, we can add here functionality to our character. So say we do the R key, we can add a input here. So when we press R, we could do something like launch character. And we can do for a velocity here on the Z-axis, 2000 in the air. So you want to hit this compile here, and that means you've compiled your blueprint and you're ready to run it. You also have your save button here to save your blueprint. So I can hit play and hit R. You see we launched our character in the air. We can also create variables, and over here on the left you can see we have a variables tab. So variables allow us to store information like numbers, letters, and such. So we could add a new variable by clicking this plus button. And here we have different variable types. So we have a Boolean, which is true or false, integer, which is just a whole number, a float, which could be like a percentage or decimal number, a name, which is just text, string, which is also text, pretty much the same thing. Vector, it is a combination of like three numbers like X, Y, and Z. Rotator is essentially the same thing, but information for a rotation. And then transformation, which is a combination of all three plus scale. So we can add, say, like a float, and we can name this variable health. And what we need to do to give it a default value is we need to compile, and we can add something like 100 for 100 HP. So in our content browser, we can add a new blueprint class actor, and we can name this damage box. Double click that, and we can add here a component. So you can see there are various different components. Like I said, our character is made up of a skeletal mesh and camera, as well as a collision. So for our damage box, we're going to add a simple box collision. We can name this damage box. And on the right side of the details, you can see as we select different components, we have different details on the right side. So we can click R in this viewport to scale our damage box. It's all the same controls as you are used to in the normal viewport. So if we scroll down here on the details, we can add some events. So a collision box allows us to add an event if our player runs into that box. So for example, on component begin overlap, we can add by hitting that plus button. We can drag off of the other actor and cast to third person character. So whenever someone runs into that box, it's going to cast to the third person character to see if they are of this character class. If so, we're going to apply damage, and we're going to do 10 base damage. So we can just do 10 and click compile. Now we can go to our character, and in our event graph, we can add an event any damage. So these are the built-in functions to Unreal: apply damage and event any damage. So if we have any sort of damage applied to us, we can take our health minus or subtract by that damage, and then set our health value to that new value. So the incoming damage, we're going to subtract that from our health and set that to our new health variable. Then we can drag off of here and do a print string so that we can see what's going on. And we want to connect the health into the string so that it converts from a float variable to a string. Now we can go ahead and drag our damage box right here into the scene. We can make this a bit large like so. And if we hit play, we can run over to our little damage box. And you're going to see in the top left, we did 10 damage, 80 HP, 70 HP, 60, 50, 40, 30, and so on. So we can add, say, some sort of fire here that could possibly damage the character, and you can scale this box around that fire to have that effect. What I'm going to go ahead and do is to go back to our third-person character blueprint, and Off of here, we're going to check to see if the health is less than or equal to 0. And off of our Boolean here, we're going to do a branch. And a branch allows us to do a true or false. So it allows us to check to see if the player's health is less than or equal to 0. If so, we could do this. If it's not true, we could do this. So if it is true, we're going to get our mesh and going to set simulate physics. Connect that up to the true and check mark simulate. And then one more thing, we have to select our mesh, scroll down to our collision and hit the drop down for collision presets. And we're going to hit collision presets. We're going to scroll down and do ragdoll. So hit compile and hit play. And if we run over to our collision box, so if I hit over here, you're going to see 90 HP, 80, 70, 60. And when my HP reaches 0, you can see my character ragdoll. So there's my character right there. Pretty simple logic, but you can create some very powerful things just with Blueprint. So that's going to be pretty much it for the Unreal Engine 5 beginner tutorial. Hope you guys learned a couple things. Some couple tips that you guys can take away for if you're going to try and learn Unreal Engine 5 is that game development is not going to be easy per se. You're always going to run into some sort of challenge. You're going to have to search the problem of that issue and try and figure out where exactly in your blueprint you made a mistake or something like that. So always expect that you're going to run into some sort of issue when you're working on a game, because I want to say half of game development, if not more, is solely working on fixing bugs and trying to figure out the solution to some sort of problem. Anyways, that's going to be pretty much it for this tutorial. Hope you guys learned something new. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button and leave a comment down below. I'll be making some more tutorial series like this, so guys, make sure you stick around, and I'll see you guys in the next one.